Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. And as always, being here with us, virtually, spiritually, emotionally. Welcome everybody from all over the world, including Monsey, New York, and of course from the Holy Land, and wherever else you're joining us from this morning or this afternoon or this evening. So before we begin, I'll just announce that tonight at 9 p.m. New York time, we are going to continue part 3 of the Maimer Basi Legani Tovshin Chav Beis, 1962. First 2 parts we learned in the previous days. They're posted on the yeshiva.net. Tonight's class will be live streamed. For those who want to come in person, it's in Monsey, 4 Dogwood Place in Pomona, just like last Thursday. But those who are a little further can also watch the live stream on the yeshiva.net. That's 9 p.m. Our discussion was and is the revolution of the Alter Rebbe, known as Ur Ein Sof, and the meaning and essence of light, and the light that is infinite. That's this evening. And of course, Monday morning, there will also be the regular 7:30 a.m. Shir. I see that our Tuesday women's class has on our website, I think, 11 or 12,000 views, and on YouTube, I think also double, because I discussed the topic of a little bit what's going on in Israel now. It's a very, very painful week, and the cover-ups in some of our communities. So we explored that. If you have some time, I will suggest it. It was the women's class of Tuesday. It's also on the yeshiva.net, discussing the lie of the Nile River and the lies that we tell ourselves and others. Also later this evening, we will be posting a Hebrew class that I gave just last night in Hebrew about this whole parsha, which is not easy, and may Hashem give everybody who needs it the strength and the fortitude to be able to navigate such moments with unwavering clarity and profound leadership and courage and confidence and love and compassion. So, my dearest friends, oh, what else did we have? Oh, Monday, I'm forgetting. Monday night we had a 4.5-hour session with Rabbi Shais Taub on how to learn and teach Tanya in our generation. Turned out to be very interesting, fascinating, insightful, many great questions from the people that we addressed. You can also see it on the website, on the yeshiva.net. Tuesday night, we had a wonderful Yiddish Farbrengen in honor of the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit, and that shall also be posted probably in the next few days for those who speak Yiddish. So, we began our shir in this Sicha. We began our shir in the Sicha of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Parshas Vaera, last Monday, just a few days ago, and today we continue part 2. If you didn't open your source sheets, please open your source sheets. As always, the source sheets are on the yeshiva.net, and now they're also being posted on the chat, on the Zoom. So anybody who's on Zoom, you now have it. If you go to the chat for everyone, you'll see it. Okay, I'm just looking where we're holding. And let's go. Okay, we're up to Siv Daled, page 50. In your source sheets, it's page 50. In the first class, in this Sicha, this talk, this shiur of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that was presented, Shabbos Parshas Vaera Tovshin Lamed Aleph, that's 1971, 51 years ago, published in Likkutei Sichos, volume 16, Parshas Vaera. We learned the first three seifim, first three chapters. We're holding chapter 4, Seif Dalet. It's the second column on page 50. The first half, which is what we addressed last time, we learned through and tried to have a basic understanding in a very, very intense Rashi in the beginning of Vaera, because the sequence of the verses and of the events is not easily understood in Chumash, which is why the commentators have so many different perspectives. But the point was that at the end of Parashat Shmos, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Hashem and he cries out, Lama Ariyos Lama Zeh, why have you afflicted, why have you brought so much suffering and agony to this people? And since I came to Paroi to speak in your name to emancipate them, you did not save the people. On the contrary, things became much, much worse. And Hashem responds, and this is the last pasuk of Shmos, Ata Theyre, now you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paroi. He's going to expel you from his land. And then comes a new parsha, Vaera. Hashem speaks to Moshe and he says, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov with the name Shin Daled Yud, but they never saw the name Yud K Vav K. And I made a covenant with them to give them the land of Eretz Yisrael. And now I've heard the outcry of the Jewish people, and go tell the Jewish people, I am God, and I'm going to extract you from Egypt, and going to save you, and going to liberate you, and take you out of here, and bring you to the Holy Land. What's this sequence here? What is going on here? At the end of Shmos, Hashem says one thing. In the beginning of Vaera, he starts a new conversation about, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So Rashi gives us a second interpretation, which Rashi himself rejects. It's from the Medrash. And what was the interpretation? The interpretation was that our Rebbes taught that this entire sequence is all a continuation of Shmos. Moshe said, why have you caused so much suffering to the people? And Hashem said, I miss the Avos. I grieve the death of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why? I revealed myself to them many times with my name, Shin Daled Yud. They never asked me what your name is. You asked me what's my name. I made a covenant with them that they get the Holy Land, but Avram Avinu has to buy a plot, he has to pay a lot of money. Yitzchak has to fight for the wells that he dug in Eretz Yisrael, which is his land. Yaakov has to buy and purchase a field for a large sum of money near Shechem. And none of them second-guessed me. And you second-guess me. You want to know, why am I behaving this way? They can accept me on my terms. You didn't. Rashi rejects his interpretation. He says it's not the literal interpretation. He says it's one of the interpretations, but it's not the literal flow. This is how Rashi understands. So the whole beginning of Vaera is Hashem responding to Moshe, contrasting his behavior with the behavior of the Avos. And the Rebbe's big question was, there's something off, there's something stranger. Because at the end of Shmos, Rashi said exactly the same thing. When Hashem said, now you're going to see, he says Hashem was lamenting that you're not like Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, I told him to bring Yitzchak as an offering. And his response was obedience. He didn't second guess me. He didn't say, how can you do this? You told me that Yitzchak is going to father a nation. And you are second guessing me. And the Rebbe says, he doesn't understand. In the end of Shmos, the contrast is to Avram Avinu, and only one story, the Aked, and suddenly in Vaera, the contrast is to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and he gives different stories. Why not at the end of Shmos does he bring also Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? And in Avram itself, he brings a different story in Shmos and a different story in Vaera. In Shmos is the story of the Aked, in Vaera it's the story of Ma'amar Samachpela. Again, in the end of Shmos, it's a literal interpretation. It's not medrash. In Vaera, he says, no, it comes from Rabbi Seinu, and he rejects it too. And this was the big discussion in last week's class. The Rebbe showed the difference between the end of Shmos and the beginning of Vaera with two different perspectives that we explored, and you could review it. I'm not going to repeat it now because I want to go further, but you could review it in last week's class so you understand the literal pshat of how to understand this Rashi. Now, as we begin Siv Dalet, I'm going to remind you the story that we learned last time. You remember the story? The long story that I shared with you, the incredible story of the Maggid of Mezrich, what he saw by the Baal Shem Tov on Shabbos, and he shared it with his student, the Alter Rebbe, who shared it with his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, and it came down all the way to the Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was shared it in a letter, and that's how we know the story. And the point of the story was that the Maggid was sitting Shabbos privately with the Baal Shem Tov, with the other close students, and he was thinking why the Baal Shem Tov displays so much love and affection to the simple, illiterate, and not very educated or enlightened Jews. It's so much nicer when the meal is just with the inner circle, as they say, the Chavraya Kadisha. And the Baal Shem Tov had all the students place their arms on each other and sing many songs and close their eyes, and suddenly they saw a picture that they didn't see before. They saw the Tehillim being said by those simple Jews that Shabbos morning or that Shabbos afternoon because they came back to shul after their lunch because they weren't invited to the Baal Shem Tov's meal. And the Maggid experienced the spiritual ecstasy in heaven and on earth from their Tehillim. And what happened was, the Maggid felt so much remorse that, he second-guessed the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov gave a whole Theyre about what Shuvah is, and what sometimes a person that looks sometimes like a simple Jew reaches a place that is so much deeper and more authentic and more sincere than anybody else. And the Maggid really felt remorse that he was suspicious. He felt this negativity about what the Baal Shem Tov was doing. And he has a vision one night of Moshe Rabbeinu teaching Chumash to children, where Avram Avinu starts laughing at the promise that he's going to have a child. At least according to one of the interpretations, he was laughing. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells the children that you have to understand that even a holy body is still a body. In other words, the body responds a certain way. The body gets triggered in a certain way. Even a holy body. And that's when the Maggid calms down. The Maggid calms down after he has this vision. So this is going to be explored. I hope you remember the story. I'm not saying all the details because we did it last time. I just wanted to look something up in the story. I did it. So now let's go further. Dalet. Funyena shel Theyre in the Pirush Rashi. To explore the wine of Theyre that exists in this Rashi. The wine of Theyre, the Alter Rebbe said that in Rashi is the Yena shel Theyre, which means like Pnimi Theyre. Even in a simple Rashi, you have deep, deep esoteric and spiritual wisdom. Yashloima, one can say, Ados is mirumas in the Shaykhis, which in the Beida has bodies bepirush Rashi Hanal. It will be intimated in the connection between the two explanations that we gave in Rashi. The two explanations were, the first explanation was that at the end of Parsha Shmos, Moshe Rabbeinu is complaining to Hashem not just that he did not manage to save the Jewish people, but that by coming to Parai, things became worse. Which is much more painful. It's like, you don't want to send me, don't send me. But now it's not just you didn't send. It's not just you sent me. You sent me to redeem them, and Pare increased the burden of labor. So here Hashem has to contrast Moshe's behavior to another behavior where, as a result of Hashem's promise, things became worse. And that's why he brings the Akedah. If you don't make a promise, you don't make a promise. Somebody doesn't have a child, it's very painful. But when you bless somebody with a child, when they're older, and then that child is taken away, and the father is the one who has to do it, the pain is so much more profound. Hashem promised Avram Avinu, you're going to have a child, and he has a child. Then he tells him this child is going to father a nation. So it's this promise that caused such a deeper tsar, and still Avram Avinu did not second guess God. So that was the contrast only at the end of Shmos. So Rashi couldn't bring the other stories of Marsa Machpelah with Avram, or the wells of Yitzchak, or the field of Yaakov. Over there, Hashem's promise did not raise the prices. They had to pay anyway. The question is, Hashem told them this is your land. So therefore he brings, in the end of Shmos, one story, Vaera another story, as explained at length. The second explanation was, in Seif Gimel, Moshe wasn't complaining about himself, he was complaining about the people. So you can't talk about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in terms of things that happened to themselves when they wanted to buy a field. Because over there they could have said to themselves that maybe the promise wasn't fulfilled because of their own misdoings, their own misdeeds, Garim Achet. But Moshe can't say that it's not about himself. He can't say his sin causes the whole nation to suffer. So it's a whole different complaint. So that's why he brings from Avram Avinu with Akedah. Over there, it wasn't about Avram Avinu himself that he's being punished. It's for all the generations. There's not going to be a Jewish people. So you can't say it's because of his own sin. Nonetheless, he accepted it. He didn't feel he has to wrap his brain around God. By Yitzchak and Yaakov, we don't find such behavior. That's why in Shmos he brings out another element, where in Vaera he brings out a different element. So he says, let's see the connection between these two explanations. We once spoke at length, when you speak about the lives of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there's two aspects. Aleph, number one, v'maisa avos hat sich getan bei der avos mitzad gufam. Und in dem ist shaykh as Avram soll deigen shema kebalt ischan al tzitkoisai, soll beten an ois a Yerusha saaretz val derech ze bei Yaakov. You have the avos and the way their actions happen because of their bodies. And here Avram Avinu could be worried that maybe he received a reward for his good deeds, as it says in Parshas Lech Lecha, and he's asking for a sign from Hashem that he's going to inherit the land. That's in Parshas Lech Lecha. Or similarly by Yaakov, he's afraid that maybe he won't be saved from Esav in the beginning of Vayishlach. This takes us to the story of the Mizrich Magid as at Gezen vi Moshe Rabbeinu led it mit Tinoike shel Bisraben dem Pasuk vayipol Avram al panav vayitzchak vayemer belibe halaben mei shana yivolet v'msara bas tishim shana teled und is a masber as ein mikra yotzim de pshuta. The Magid has a vision, Moshe learning with Jewish kids, and he teaches them the Pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha. This is in Gan Eden, that Avram Avinu laughs. Am I going to have a child when I'm 100? Is Sarah going to have a child when she's 90? And Moshe says that every pasuk has to be understood. Ein mikra yotzim de pshute. Literally, how can Avram Avinu doubt Hashem's promise? And he says you have to understand that the body has its own rhythm, and you can't feel terribly alienated by that. You have to almost understand how the body works. In other words, sometimes there are thoughts that come in naturally because you have a guf, and it responds in a certain way. And it's not the end of the world. The Maggid calmed down. The Maggid realized that his thoughts, in which he was responding to the Baal Shem Tov, it's because the guf perceives a certain element of reality, and it experiences these sensations. It's a fascinating idea, and you have to appreciate that. You have to know that. You can't beat yourself up for that. It calmed down the Maggid because Moshe Rabbeinu said it about Avram Avinu. Then, of course, there's a decision how you're going to behave, what you're going to do. But the fact that your body is experiencing certain sensations, it's a very, very fascinating idea. This comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, telling it to the children in Gan Eden that the Maggid sees, and the Rebbe is saying it over. The Maggid is saying it over about himself. He's telling the Alter Rebbe, who tells us the Tzemach Tzedek, that you just have to appreciate that. Yeah. There's a story happened in Warsaw. It was a fascinating story. I have to remember the details. It was shared by Rabbi Yosef Weinberg. The Germans, the Nazis, declared war on Poland September 1st, 1939. Yud Zayin Elul Tafresh Tzadik Tes. Just 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. And of course, this was the beginning of the Second World War, which changed everything. Polish jury numbered then, I think, more than 3 million. In a few years, Poland and most of Eastern Europe would be Judenrein. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was in Warsaw, Nazi-occupied Warsaw. And during those first weeks, the bombs were falling in Warsaw. The planes were flying over Warsaw. The Nazis entered Warsaw, and the bombs were falling. Many, many people died in those explosions. And the Rebbe himself, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's life himself, was in danger, like all of the other Jews living there in the center of Warsaw. The Rebbe then, the Rebbe Rayatz, was a very calming figure. He was very, very calming and serene figure for the people around, for his students, for his family. He would sit and write a lot. And he was one day sitting and writing, I think he was writing a mimer. And a bomb fell very close. And it exploded. It literally, sometimes it feels like it exploded 1 foot away from you and you're done. That was the sensation. Somebody was there, wrote it down, Rabbi Weinberg. And the Rebbe's hand started to tremble. He also had MS. His hand started to tremble. And this person nearby got very scared when he saw the Rebbe trembling. And the Rebbe said, I'm not scared. Every bomb has an address. But the guf responds in a certain way. Internally, he was not overwhelmed. He was not terrified. But the body responds a certain way. That's part of the rhythm. There's different levels of that. Sometimes the body responds with internal terror. The point is that the guf has a dynamic. It has a vibrancy of its own. It's what we've been talking about, the donkeys, the 3 donkeys. So maybe it's interesting that Moshe is the one who says this. He's the one who started to, use the donkey for his wife and his children, as we spoke last week. So this made the Maggid feel much better. So the Rebbe says here that when we speak about the avos, there's a level of Maisa avos, the way it's facilitated through the body. And there Avram Avinu could say, how do I know you're going to give me the land of Eretz Yisrael? Or Yaakov could say, I don't feel safe even though you promised me. I'm worried. And this is a fascinating idea that even the avos, who have such a holy body, but nonetheless, it's a guf. It's a guf, and it responds a certain way to phenomena, to stimuli, to what it observes. Then there's beis. There's a second dimension. Ma'isa avos, wie das hat sich aufgetan mit seinem Nishmasam. Was in dem ist klar nicht scheich, ken hiriru acha midoise. Then there's the Ma'isa avos, the way it's happening on the level of their soul. And on the level of their soul, they're not questioning God at all. There's no questioning God. There's complete trust. There's complete faith. how do you translate? I'm looking. Hiriru acha midoisai. So I think it's the idea of questioning, questioning Hashem's ways. On the level of the soul, they don't question Hashem's ways. They're just completely aligned. If this is Hashem's desire, they're good. They're not questioning the way he runs the world. Umat Vaera given at a previous occasion, a previous Sicha, we explained, as the Pirushim in Pirush Rashi al der Chabad Gufa Theyre, reden wegen Meise Oves Mezenem Mitzad HaGuf. Und the Pirushim al der Chamedush HaGadosh B'Theyre with Meise Oves Mezenem Mitzad HaNeshama. The explanations in Rashi on a literal level, which represents the body of Theyre, reflect the actions of the Avos as they are happening on a bodily level. The explanations in Medrash, which deal with the soul of Theyre, reflect the Avos as they are experienced from a soul perspective. And both are true. There's layers in Theyre that reflect layers of people. So the pshat of Theyre represents the guf. The guf of Theyre represents the guf of a person. The agada of Theyre, the neshama of Theyre, represents the neshama of a person. Al derech zeh b'inyanenu. In Pirush Rashi Seif Parsha Shmois, was is al derech hapshat, redt sich wegen Meise Oves v'zeinem mitzad haguf. Die Rebbe kämen nicht bringen an Reihe zum Moshe Scheile b'negei la'am hazeh, von dem was loi hiru b'negei in yaneim aprote v'bald es kennen as Avram tracht shama kibalti schar al derech zeh b'Yakov. Ma schenken loit Rabbi Seinu darshu, agada sheb'Theyre. Was Roiv Seides ha-Theyre gnuzen ba, is der Ingen von Meise Oves mitzad haneshama, is a raya euch von dem, what the Avos loi hiriru b'negei zeire in yanim pratim. Al derech ze kemen mazbe sein euch b'sheiches zu Moshe Rabbeinu. I'll explain in a moment. Das, was Moshe hat geteinet. Lama reyoyse lama zeh, umi oz basil paralav rishmachere lama zeh. Like pshuti shal mikri, das gewen mit zat oifena Aleph, is shaykh zu sagen, das ist an ihnen von ihr Herti al midoise. Und kaivel an al sheshalachthani. A teine klappe dem Ebersten Kawayachal als ein Schliches und Geirem gewinnt der Matze von Heder von Jeden. Und die Ribber ist der eine Schlefichich Ata Tira, Asile Pari Tira, Veloi Chuli. Ma schenken al Pira Beisenu der Schuh, das sich wieder Ingen ist, mit hat Eufen Abbeis. Kann man nicht sagen, als der Teine zum Moshe ist gewinnt, auf Hirir am Midoise Kipschutoi, und er sagt, bekommen an Eunisch der Fahr. Na, der Teine ist bestanden darin, was Harbe Palmem Neglesia lehm bekel Shadai. V'loi amruli ma shimcha v'ata marta ma shmoi, hainu was gewollt wissen, shimcha ha-gadol va-ha-kadosh, soid shem ha-mefurish. Zukommen zu a hechere Yediyah Salakus, shem ha-vaya, midas ha-mitis shali, shem ha-etzem. Und afilo das, was gesagt, lama reyoyse lama zeh, ist nicht kein Ingen von ihr Hartal midoyse kipshutai, nur euch in dem hat gewollt und gebeten zu verstehen, euch besichle alle Pratim und Drachen von dem Ebersten Schliches, und al pizeh is meduyik, was Rashi sagt nicht bei einer Besene der Schuhe dem Loschen, Hartal midoyse benegei le Moshe, wie sagt in sein Peter Seif Parsha Shmois al derech hapshat. Here, this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe is suggesting. In Rashi, at the end of Shmois, and we explained Rashi is taking there the literal interpretation. He doesn't say it's Medrash. He's talking about the Maisa Avos as they're reflected through the body. And remember, even a holy and sacred and splendid body, even a guf kadosh, as Moshe Rabbeinu told the children, is basarhu. It's flesh. It has its rhythm. It has its dynamics. It has its triggers. It has the way it absorbs and detects stimuli and the way it responds. So on the level of pshat, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Lama re'oisa la'am hazeh, and Hashem responds, we don't bring a proof to Moshe's question about Am Hazeh. Lama re'oisa la'am hazeh. And say, oh, Hashem said, you're not like the Avos of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because they did not question my ways in this world when they had to buy their plots of land. Rashi doesn't bring that in Parsha Shmois. Why? Because we said, and now we understand it deeper, because Avram or Yitzchak or Yaakov, on a body level, could say, maybe I received rewards. And therefore Hashem is not going to do this for me. These are our responses of the guf. it was their own individual issues. He has to buy the Maris Machpelah. Yitzchak Avinu wants to find his wells. Yaakov Avinu is trying to buy a field. And they're not second-guessing Hashem. They're not questioning his ways. So the Rebbe says on a deeper level, Rashi doesn't bring those things. You know why? He's now explaining Rashi on a deeper level. Because it could be that they actually did have thoughts because of their body, their guf. Could be they did. On the level of guf. On the level of Maisavas on the guf. What does he bring? He brings Avram by the Akedah. Where it wasn't about his own personal issue. In Parshas Vaera, he speaks about Drash, Rabbi Seinu Darshu, the Medrash. Here we're discussing Maisa Avos of the Neshama. So there's a proof from the fact that the Avos did not question Hashem also about their individual things, because it's on the level of the Neshama where there's no hitter. So therefore Rashi brings those things as well. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in their private lives where they didn't question anything. This is on the level of Neshama. Where on the level of Guf, it could be they did. He just brings from the Akedah, where Avram Avinu did not. The same thing you could say about Moshe himself. Moshe at the end of Shmos tells Hashem, why are you doing it? He says, on a literal level, this is on the first level of Moshe, where he complains, why did you send me? He's complaining to Hashem. You shouldn't have sent me. I don't understand what you're doing. By sending me, you made things worse. That's on the level of Guf. In Vaera, when you're speaking about Rabbi Seinu Darshu, again on the level of Neshama, you're not going to say Moshe Rabbeinu was literally questioning God and he was punished for it. No, it's a whole different understanding. Over there, it's about the fact that Moshe wanted to understand what Hashem's name is. He wanted to have a deeper awareness of Hashem. And even when he says, why did you afflict the people? He's not questioning God's ways. He's trying to understand in his mind Hashem's mission. That's what he's trying to do. That's why over there it actually doesn't use the word Hir hartal midaisa, you question my ways, by Moshe, as he does at the end of Parshas Shmos. So the Rebbe is saying it's possible at the end of Shmos, the beginning of the era, it's two different layers of reality. And therefore one is Pshat and one is Medrash. One deals with the Guf, one deals with the Neshama. This is based on the fact that there's two layers, there's two different levels. But here one ought to ask the question, one could continue to ask the question, wie ist Shaykh sagen hartal mit dieser Kipschute a Film mit Eifene Alef. Bald der Retzach wegen Moshe. Was gleich beim geboren worden wird, ihm gesagt, was Theyre ist ki Teufel. Ne smale Rabbi ist kula eure. Und befragt haben sie noch dabei, Madgir sein, als Davis aber nicht Mahare gewinnt, und Moshe, was ist gewinnt, Nifche mit Kolmina Adam, euch von Davis hat ja Mahare gewinnt. Euch darf man verstehen. Wie bald ist viele Begnus bei ihm mit Meile, die Barakosov, ist doch Pschitte, wenn ich gehe, Ayiden, Allachas kam, wenn ich gehe zu Moshe Rabbeinu. Hein verwas der Zelt Theyre, als Moshe hirit al Midoi sei. Was Hiroi da in dem Fall, der Iden bei Vidasse Lekeine, Lechayre ist schwer zu sagen, als der Fun, darf Ayid ablehnen, wie viel man muss sein, ausgeht, von Mahare sein, ach, das wird Schlakadosh Baruch Hu, das darf sich finden. Leute, an Hage von Davis, was Leute hirit waren, wie bald das Moshe Rabbeinu ist, damit zugekommen ist, wie macht man es bei jedem Iden Bechalzmann. Even on the level of a body, how can you say that Moshe really questioned Hashem? You're talking about Moshe. But Moshe, it says, when he was born, his mother saw he was good. What does it mean he was good? So Chazal say the whole house filled up with light. Why did they say that? Because the first time good is mentioned in Chumash's, Hashem saw that the light was good. That's the first taif. So when it says she saw that Moshe was good, it means he came with light. As he came into the world, the whole house filled with light, was filled with light. So if this is who Moshe Rabbeinu is, how is it then that he really questions God, even on the level of the guf? Furthermore, Hashem says, the Ava is not, you, yeah. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rambam says, was nifcher mikol min adam. He reached the ultimate perfection that a person can reach. He was the most choicest of the entire human species, even the Avos. He was greater than the Avos. That's what the Rambam writes. Nifcher mikol min hanushi. Moshe was the quintessential human being. So the Avos not, and Moshe, yeah. So you'll say, well, on a level of a body. But even on the level of the body, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he filled the world with light, it was his body. And the Rebbe brings in 40 focuses another opinion that what it means he was good, what it means she saw he was good is that he was born circumcised. That's a phenomenon in the body, not in the soul only. So you have to say when the house was filled with light, it's also a phenomenon of the body. His body radiated divine light. That's question number one. Question number two. We have a principle, Chazal tell us about Basra, Kuf Chav Gimel, that the Theyre is sensitive even to an impure animal. You don't even want to talk about the disgrace of an impure animal. Certainly a Jew, certainly Moshe Rabbeinu, unless it's necessary. Why is the Theyre telling this us? Why is the Theyre telling us? Why is it relevant to the story? Moshe questioned God, and we're bringing out the negativity. Moshe is not like the others. So if there's a lesson, fine, I understand. It's important to give lessons. But the Rebbe says, what's the lesson? So maybe the lesson is that we should realize that we shouldn't question God. In other words, let's learn from the Avos, in contrast to Moshe. But the Rebbe says, is that a real lesson? You're telling a Jew that even Moshe didn't attain this. So this is what you demand from every single Jew and at every time in his life? These are the two questions. Vav, wenn man das verstehen, der Habir, was Rashi stellt sich auf dem Wort Vaera und ist mefarisch al ha'avos. Es yadua de kushi, wie mefarisch Rashi fragen, der Pasuk allein teitscht doch ist gleich Vaera, Avram und sagt, weil Jakob, wie was geht der Rashi zu? There's another question. On the Pasuk Vaera, it says, Vaera, I appeared, al Avram, al Yitzchak, vel Yaakov. So Rashi quotes Vaera, and he says, el ha'avos, to the avos. That's superfluous. It says clearly in the Pasuk, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. At this point, we know who Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are. What is Rashi adding by saying El Ha'avos? Is the Hasbarin, the explanation is Rashi, is the Mit-Ois and Samaz Bezayin, as the Inyan V'ilif and Vaera El Avram, B'Iyan El Akuz, B'Vados and Muchash, is V'di Vados, Shadei Yagashvis, was the Faris, by Zainish Gewen Shaykh, Rachem Edoisai, ze gehad als Avos von der Bnei Yisrael. Das heißt, dass Vaera ist, ich habe mir gewonnen zu sehen, an Neifen hat das Allah bekommen, bei Yerusha, von der Avos. Zu de Bonim, nach sei, vor dem Ma'av Zeichel ben Neu v'chuli b'chachma. Und wie es ist bewur in Theyre von der Parashin im Minyan, als ein Keuren Avos alle Schleusha. Als Beginnes ha'Avos Yerusha lebnei Machareim b'chal Theyre, Beginnes Avos Tzadich lies b'chal Adam. Those is the top. If the Taine was the Eberstadt gesagt, zu Moshe Rabbeinu Chaval al da Abden v'la Mishtachrin, v'bald as Vaera al Avram, is given als zu Avos, is nicht takke nooit veränderten als Avram, gehen wir seinen anders, wie bald er da sich als Avos, is bechol Adam als Ben, darf sein und sich an der Beginn des Vaera, haben dich bei Yerusha. The answer why Rashi says al ha'avos is because Rashi is trying to say that when Hashem says, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, in other words, they had a clear awareness of godliness, Vaera. It's like when you see something, when somebody sees something, what do we say? Seeing is believing. So this experience, and that's why they didn't question God. They were at peace with God because they had a direct, intimate experience of Hashem. So they could be okay with the fact that they didn't understand, because they knew this is the reality of Hashem. And once you know that it exists, once you know Hashem is here, Hashem is present, Hashem is infinite love, they could be fine, they could be okay. This experience they had not as individuals, they had it as Avos, Vaera la Avos. They had it as our fathers. In other words, the Vaera was given to them in a way that it becomes part of the genetic mutation, so to speak. It becomes like a genetic mutation that is bequeathed to all of the Jewish people for eternity. Because the father bequeaths his qualities to the child, just as the mother bequeaths her genes and qualities, as the Mishnah says in Maseches Eidos. Every one of the avos exists in us. It's true genetically and it's true spiritually. We are each product that come from Avram, that come from Yitzchak, that come from Yaakov. So Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov live in us. It's not like the Shvatim. The Shvatim, there's 12 tribes, and some Jews come from Reuven and not from Shimon. Some Jews come from Yehuda and not from Yosef. Some Jews come from Binyamin and not from Levi. Some Jews come from Levi and not from Yehuda. But the avos, it says, avos are only three. The Gemara says, Ein kairin avos ela l'shlosh. In Brachas Tezayin. So the Alter Rebbe says in Theyre, because the dimension of the avos go to every Jew. The Shvatim, it's different paths. There's 12 pathways. I may not have your path, but Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is generic for every Jew because they're our fathers. It's true genetically. We carry literally their genes and everything that's embedded in their genes, and it's true, of course, spiritually. So Rashi says, Vaera la avos. Hashem is not speaking about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as three individual people of great stature. He's talking about them as fathers who bequeathed what they have to their descendants, to their progeny, to their offspring throughout the generations. And that's why Hashem could tell Moshe, chaval al da'abden, I miss the avos, since I appeared to them as avos, as fathers. So one can say, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were different because they were just unique. But here, they're fathers. And therefore the child has the imprint, has the gene, has the essence, has the soul of a father. So the Vaera is a gift that's given over to the avos and is bequeathed to the Jewish people. That's why Rashi says Vaera ela avos. So therefore it belongs to Moshe Rabbeinu also, and it belongs to every Jew also. But wait. We could still take this one step further, and we could dissect it a little further and say, come on. Hagama is the Avgite besein Inyanim Beirushet zum Ben, von deswegen is moving. As nachdem wir die Inyanim kommen herab zum Jörisch, kommen sie nicht zu der Meile, wie sie haben gehad sein dich beim Av. I may inherit things from my father, but it's not on the same level. True, a father bequeaths to a child, a mother bequeaths to a child, but we can understand that a child does not reach or attain necessarily, at least in certain aspects, the same stature, the same level of the father. It's not on the same level. Right? He says in 52, we have the expression, Brakara davua. A son is the leg, is the foot of the father. Why the foot? Foot is a lower level. Und wie bald das sei, kann man doch verentfen, als der Dage ist Vaera, wo der Ben hat Birush, kommt nicht zu der hechere Dage von Vaera, wie sie es gewinnt bei Davos. You could say, okay, the Vaera was given to them as fathers, as patriarchs, and therefore it's bequeathed to the next generations, but it gets diluted. It gets compromised. It gets minimized. It gets filtered. It gets condensed. A child doesn't necessarily embody the full dazzling depth of their grandfather, their great-great-grandfather. Is the beard in them Eichmanum is in Pirush Rashi. But the explanation in this is also intimated in Rashi. Rashi says, Vaera el ha'avos. The ganze Gilui from Vaera is given to the avos. The Hainu as the Gilui is nit mitzad on loit zeya madrege miyuchedes in avodas Hashem. Avram Ayavi in Kava Ava, Pachad Yitzchak bekava Gvura v'chule. Man in ganzem verbunden mit den Indien, was es einen avos zu bonnen, was a ben Yerush HaKoil. Aber Meile is moving as in dem Vaera is netaki chilik zwischen avos zu bonnen. Well, the Yisro na Meile was it da in dem Avlag, aber dem Ben Yishayich in Yonim was the avos egat, mitzad Meile is avodas Atzmai, als Oived Hashem v'chule. Was agam as Chazel Chinyanim kommen a Rabbi Yerush zu Kinder Kanal b'Mishnah Meidish Chuli kennen sie aber sein beim Yerush nicht auf derselben Heuche Tage wie beim Yerush. Ma schenken beniden de Dan. Wo der Ilui von Vaera Hakadosh Baruch Hu Tzadatzmi ist zu Avos, was dem Theyre mit Sies macht auf der Ben, ist moving as der Ilui kamei Shehu bam Av kommt bei Yerush zu den Kinder. Und al Pi kol an alles noch nicht verstandig, wie bald as jeder Ried und Kolsche kein Moshe Rabbeinu hat der Minion von Vaera bei Yerush mei Avos. Heint wie kommt es, was das hat nicht abgehalten Moshe Rabbeinu für die Rache mit das. So the Rebbe says, no, Rashi says Vaera la avos, and what he means is that the whole Vaera came to them only because they were fathers. It wasn't a response to their own spiritual level in serving Hashem. Avram has the dimension of love, and Yitzchak the dimension of awe and strength. It was given to them because they're fathers. In other words, because of their children. And the child inherits everything from the father. So in the Vaera, there's no distinction between the fathers and the children. When you say that a parent inherits things to children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but it's not in the same way, it's diluted, it's on a much lower level. It's when you're talking about things that the father or the mother achieved through their own work and because of their own work, because of their commitment, their avodas Hashem. So this will go over to the children, but it may not be as intense, it may not be as revealed, it may not be as potent, it may be more dormant. But here Hashem is saying, Vaera ela avos. The reason that I appear to them is because they are your fathers. Who makes you a father? Your child. There's things you have not because of you, there's things you have because of your child, because you're a father. Vaera ela avos is because they were avos. In other words, it's the child that makes them avos. It's the child that allows you to have it. I gave it to them for you. If so, whatever they had is coming to you because it's going to them because of you. It's not coming to them because of themselves. So after we explained all of this, we're back to our big question. So Moshe Rabbeinu now doesn't have it. The avos get it because of the children. So we explained that the Vaera of the avos is embedded in every single Jew. And that's why Rashi says Vaera el ha'avos. And that's why you can ask Moshe. And you could compare and say, Chaval al da'avdin v'la mishtachin. Look how the avos were, because this experience of having a relationship with Hashem that is real and intimate, like seeing, it's like when you see something. And it's a real thing. And therefore they didn't have to logically wrap their brains around God. Because if you know that Hashem is very real and He exists and He's present, everything is different. Doesn't mean I understand why it happened. But it means that there's a certain calmness, there's a certain serenity. So Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, we are those avos because this Vaera is something that was given to them because of the children, and therefore it's the same level that it's by them as by the children. And yet we see here that Moshe Rabbeinu, from all people, from all the children, Moshe is questioning Hashem. Every Jew, certainly Moshe has the Vaera. If every Jew has it, certainly Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet Moshe questions, not like the avos. And as the second question, and who's Moshe? The one who filled up the whole world with light right when he was born with his body. And the second question, we don't even speak negatively about an impure animal if it's not necessary. Why does the Theyre tell us the story? How does it add? So the Rebbe now tells us the answer. Listen to the answer. Possibly this is the explanation. Razal Zag and Chazal say, the Jewish people were liberated from Mitzrayim because of their emunah. This is in Mechilta B'Shalach and in Yalkut Shemaini, you could see in the footnotes. 53 star. Das heißt, als bei sie ist Nesgale geworden, die Nekudas Hayadus, der Verbund von Iden mit dem Ebersten. Was das dickt sich aus in der Emunah von Iden in dem Ebersten, das hat sie gemacht reu, als sie sollen ausgelöst werden von Mitzrayim. Chotsch als euch früher. Seien dich noch in Kushei Hagolus von Mitzrayim. Seinen Iden gewähren ma minim. Ist das aber verbunden mit dem, was sie seinen Bnei ma minim. Sie haben es gehabt bei Yerusha, in welchen Matzev die Bonim sollen nicht sein begili. Aber bei Tzadinyanim war wir das für die Yidim, Tzadchunas Abonim Atzmam, ist bei sie noch nicht gewähnt der Urei Amunah, Schleimus Agili von Amunah. Und bei der, als die Jiden sollen ausgelesen werden von Mitzrayim, mit seiner eigenen Mischos. Das soll sein, sie ist Schar, hat die Yerusha, die Amunah und es Kasches von Jiden mit den Ebersten gedacht, bei sie werden, sie ist ein eigener Inyan. What does it mean they were left Mitzrayim because of Amunah? It says it means that by them there was revealed that essential, what we call Pintele Yid, Nekudas Hayadus, the seminal core of Judaism. The relationship of a Jew with Hashem, which is expressed in Amunah. Amunah is the fact that in his deepest or her deepest place, there is an awareness of a connection and a relationship with Hashem. Amunah is not, I just believe in something you told me. Amunah is the manifestation of this relationship. And when the Jewish people can experience it in a real and vivid way, it allowed them to become free. Even in exile, they always believed. Hashem told Moshe, Jews are ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. Moshe said they won't believe me. Hashem says they believe. But that's ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. Anachnu ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. They're believers because they're the children of believers. Children inherit what their fathers and mothers have. Since Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had a munah, Jews also have a munah. But that's something that you inherit. Ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. But on their own, integrated in their own psyche, in their own qualities, they didn't have the full revelation of Emunah. They didn't have what's called Ure'ei Emunah. You have to shepherd their Emunah. You have to nurture their Emunah. For Jews to be able to go out of exile, physically and spiritually, in their own merit, they had to become free. It was their schar, he says, b'schar ha'emunah. It was a reward for themselves. So this Yerusha Dike Emunah, this inherited faith, this inherited relationship of Jews with Hashem had to become something that is their own. I need to own it. There's things I get from my father, my mother, my Zayda, my Baba, my Elta Zayda. I don't own it. Sometimes it's in guilt, sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's blessing, sometimes it's emunah, sometimes it's resilience, whatever it is. We inherit the qualities of our parents to some degree, and also some of their challenges. But I don't own it. Then there is owning your life, and it's not a simple process. Some of us, we simply live out the stories of our parents. And this is true positively, it's also true not positively. Right? Sometimes I'm just living out the stories of my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. I think there's a professor in Mount Sinai Hospital. She's the one who developed this whole understanding of epigenetics, claiming that the traumas of our ancestors in Stalin's Russia or in Hitler's Holocaust or wherever they were in the world is not just something that the children lived with or the grandchildren saw, but it actually goes into the genes. So it may come out in your child because it's in the genes. That's true with trauma. It's also true with good things. We don't only inherit trauma, we also inherit faith and resilience and wisdom and mesiras nefesh and kindness. We have 2,000 years of resilience inside of us. We're not a small people. You're not a small person. But that's all the story I begin with. Hashem sends every neshama to the world, with its package. Here, special delivery. And who knows what's in those genes and what's going to come out. The Rebbe says, then now you have to make your life yours. Now you have to own your life. Such a beautiful concept. Now you have to take responsibility. Now it's my life. I can't blame my mother and my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my father. You could blame them. You could blame them for a lot, but ultimately you have to make your life yours. The Jewish people have inherited a lot. Ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. That's even in exile. It's always ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. You can't take that away. It's like I'll tell you don't have your genes. I can't change the color of your eyes. I can't change the color of your soul. You're Jewish. You have a munah. Are you screaming you're an atheist? You're screaming you're an atheist. As somebody once said, Jewish atheism is unique because Jews deny God with religious fervor. Think about that. There's no atheist like Jewish atheists. I once said from Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the legendary Rabbi Sachs, Zecher Levracha. He was giving a speech, and he was going through all the top atheists of the last few generations. They were Jewish. He spoke about Sigmund Freud. He spoke about Karl Marx. Excuse me. He was mentioning some of the Jewish philosophers and psychologists and economists who all devout atheists. So he says, my only question is Charles Darwin. In his words, he was such an apikoros. Why wasn't he a Jew? Charles Darwin was such a good apikoros. Why wasn't he Jewish? He says, I know, must have just been a random mutation. So the bottom line is that you have to own it. Now it's my life already. In other words, I say, okay, this is what I got. And now, what is going to become mine? He says in Yiddish, Zeh is an eigener inyan. It has to become mine. This is my thing. The emunah now, I own my life. And I have to say, and we all know that that's how we stop cycles of trauma. Do I say, okay, this is what I got, and I'm going to give it over to my kids, and they'll have to deal with it. And I want to say this to all of us, in our own life. Sometimes you become aware of certain patterns in your life and certain decisions that you made. You didn't have choices. You did the best that you could with the tools that you had. You really did. The question is, am I passing it on? Or am I going to say, stop, stop, let's become aware, let's not behave like robots, let me not just be triggered and respond to the stimuli. Viktor Frankl writes, between stimuli and response, there's a space. It's in that space where human meaning emerges. You hear? Between stimuli and response, there's a space. That's the space where you own your life. If there's no space, I don't own my life. You stimulate me a certain way, you trigger me a certain way, boom, boom, flight, fight, freeze, whatever the response is. Aggression, suppression, brazen aggression, passive aggression, anger, detachment. Detachment is a good one. But it's right away. There's no space. There's no ownership. In other words, I'm just a gene. I'm just a gene. But Yiddishkeit says you're not just a gene. Your genes are a manifestation of neshama, of presence. So I have to make it my own. Now listen to this test. Und das hat sich aufgetan durch Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe was the leader to help the Jews do this. Warum in dem besteht der Chilik zwischen dem Shachash Adei Avis und Adei Moshe. Besat Pchines ha-Avis kann alles dinen Kudas Hayadis, wenn man bei jedem in den Eifen shal Yerusha. Hat es beteva und mit Zad Ha-Yilad sein, der Kabin Avram Mitzvah Yaakov. Aber Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom was nice of them was says from the Shiva Roim am Shechim Chayes vel Lakus Leklos Neshamas Yisrael is Klolus Kulam v'Nikra Raya Mehemna. And his zonim of farnus and mashpiyas, the emunah was dabei Eden soll sein, or the emunah b'chinas pnimiyas, shetei emunah shlema v'chazaka v'nagat pnimiyas hanefesh, was demolt wird der emunah durchnehmen sein ganzen Mahus in kol inyan of bizin ma'aseh v'payil. This is achieved through Moshe. The difference between the Avis and Moshe is the Avis are the fathers. They're the progenitors. So they have given us Yiddishkeit, they have given us the Pintaliyid and the Emunah as an inheritance. Every Jew has it naturally embedded within him or her by birth, because you're a son or a daughter of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Moshe adds a new dimension. Moshe is not just one of the 7 shepherds, the 7 Ushpizin, that gives life and godliness and spirituality to the souls. Moshe Rabbeinu is called Raya Mehemne. He's the faithful shepherd, and he's the shepherd of faith. Raya Mehemne is the expression of Moshe in Zohar. Raya Mehemne, says the Alter Rebbe, is not just he's a faithful shepherd. He's the shepherd of faith. He shepherds the Jewish people with faith. He takes emunah and he helps us integrate it, that it should become mine. It should become internal. It should become real inside of me. I'm not just a response to my parents. It's mine. I own my life. This is what Moshe does. The emunah permeates your essence and therefore is manifested in your life all the way till action. Because it's not just a gene. Again, we inherit from our parents so much. Some things are challenging. Some things are amazing blessings. With both of them, I have to say, and what am I going to own? And what am I going to hold on to? And what's going to define my life? This is what Moshe gives the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's a teacher. He doesn't just bequeath genes. He challenges us to make decisions. He challenges us to have awareness. Al pi hanal wird man verstehen dem Teuchenin von Shilas Moshe Rabbeinu Lama Harei Oisa, was der Theyre erzählt wegen der Magamas Avram Leihirin und Shuvas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vaera El Avos. Now we'll understand why Moshe asks Hashem why. The Avos don't, Moshe does. And we'll understand why the Theyre tells us the story, even though it seems to bring out the negative about Moshe, because Avram Avinu and Yitzchak Avinu and Yaakov did not question God. And now we'll understand the response of Hashem, Vaera El Avos. Bald, es hat schon gehalten, nonze de Gule, und Moshe ist gegangen, beschlichs HaKadosh Baruch Hu zu lesen, die Jiden, hat gedacht, der Verbund von Jiden mit den Ebersten Scheidei Amunah, sein bei sei nicht bloß mit Zad Ha'avos, ma minim mit Zad B'nei ma minim, nur euch als der Amunah soll sie durchnehmen mit Zad Inyanim v'Teichanam. Und das hat sich aufgetan durch Shailas v'Hirer Moshe. Lama Harei Oisa. Mei az basi al parei heira lamaza. Was auf dem ist gekommen, Divrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vaera, daheinu as B'chines Vaera. Der Tachlis heißt Amsas b'derech Re'iyah. Und der Skashrus von Iden mit Halakus, Shayidei HaMunah, ist geworden euch mit der Metzies von Iden. Was mit Zad Atzmam ist, das Scheich der Ingen von Hireracha mit euch sei. Hat sich in ihr aufgetan der Ilui von Vaera, der Schleimus HaMunah B'Hashem, aber meila euch der Schlille Gemurah von Hireracha mit euch sei. Und der Rebbe sagt Rashi, besäuf Parashat Shmos, Hartal mit euch sei. Loika Avram, was Leihireracha mit euch sei. Der Mitte ist madgisch als der Beginne von Leihirer, was ist da bei Moshe. Und bei allen Iden mit Zad Avram, Ha'avos, ist nicht maspek. Wie bald, als mit Zad Atzmei Begali, Harta. Warum das ist ein Indien, was kommt bei Yerusha. Aber mit Zad Tivui und mit Ziyusei von dem Ben Gufe kann sein, ist Maharer. Und der Uftu von Moshe ist gewesen, als euch hat der Harta, soll kein Ort nicht haben durch Dibur HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Gilui von Vaera, Keniska La'el. Wow. This is pretty intense. At this point in history, they're about to have Geula. Moshe is going to Egypt. Moshe is in Egypt because Hashem sent him to emancipate the Jewish people. So this is the point in history with the Jews, we have to take it up a notch. The connection of Jews with God through Emunah can't just be a product of my father, my mother, my Zayda, my Baba. Ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. The Emunah could be and must be integrated and become their own. How did this happen? Through Moshe's question. Moshe has Emunah. Every Jew has Emunah. But the question is, whose Emunah is it? Is it the Zayda? Is it the Baba? Or is it mine? Moshe was bringing himself and the Jewish people to the next level. Moshe is the one who tells us Emunah ought to be integrated. It has to be in my kishkas, in my gut. You say, but Moshe's, the whole house was filled with light. And why bring out the negativity? He says, it's not negative. It's a different stage. Moshe is the one who's going to help the Jewish people find it within themselves. And this is accomplished by Moshe thinking, by Moshe questioning, by Moshe asking the question, Lama re'osa lama zah? In other words, that even in that space where there are questions, even in that space where there are doubts, even in that space where there's a protest, where my system is like, this is not okay, what are you doing? Can you have a relationship with Hashem in that space? That's what the Vaera is. Hashem, Moshe asks the question because there's a Emunah in Moshe. Of course there's a Emunah, and there's a Emunah in every Jew. But that Emunah is my father's, my Zayda's, it's Avram's, it's Yitzchak's, it's Yaakov's, which is amazing. That's the beginning, that's the foundation. But as we said, Geula happens when it becomes their own. What does it mean, my own? It reaches in that space where I do have questions. It reaches into my mind, into my heart, into my body, where I am triggered. Because it has to become mine. And for it to become mine, it has to become mine. It can't be yours, it has to be mine. And if it has to become mine, I need to be able to have the space to integrate it into me. Right? If I'm speaking to my students, and I'm like, students, I really want you to get this. And somebody says, I don't get it. You have to get it. I don't get it. You have to work with the person. getting it on my terms doesn't mean you got it. It means I got it. So Hashem's response, Vaera, is a response to Moshe's question. That this Vaera, what is Vaera? Vaera is the intimate awareness. It's like something you see. Vaera, I have appeared. The intimate awareness, the connection of Jew with Hashem through Emunah could become something that's fully integrated in the identity of every Jew. In that space, where on his own or on her own, they could question God. It's not something that's transcendent. It's something that permeates that space where there is resistance. That Hashem says, Vaera, in that space you can develop and find your relationship with God right there. And then you don't have to question. You embrace that Emunah becomes real in that space where there are triggers, where there is no understanding. That's why Rashi says at the end of Shmos, Hashem told Moshe, you're second guessing me not like Avraham. So listen how the Rebbe explains this. We all learn, you're not like Avraham. Avraham was a good guy, and you're like, like somebody wrote, when you come to school, you're not like your older sister, right? Anybody ever told that to you? You're not like your older brother. When your older brother was in yeshiva, you remember? When your father was in yeshiva, Aaron, you're lucky you never had this, Rabbi Aaron. When your father was in yeshiva, Rabbi Litzman, you also didn't have this, right? So we all learn Hashem is saying, Avram, he was a good guy. And you're like, okay. He says, no, that's not what he's saying. Listen to what he's saying. He's saying, when Avram is not Maharer, Avram is our father. His genes are us. When Avram doesn't question God, I also don't question God. Moshe doesn't question God. Avram lives in every Jew. Hashem is saying, like Avram, you can't be like Avram. Why? Because Avram not questioning God, which exists by Moshe and exists by every Jew, that's Avram's gift in you. That's Avram's gene. But where are you? You can't be like Avram. You are Avram, but you still can't be like Avram. Like Avram is also a compliment. You're not like Avram. What does it mean you're not? You are. It means you are. You have Avram inside of you, but that level is insufficient. The loy here, the not questioning God that you have because of Avram, is not sufficient because it's your inheritance. But what is yours? What's yours? Where are you? And how do we know it's insufficient? Because you're questioning. This means that the inheritance has not become holistic. It's not been integrated. You're questioning. Hirharta. So when he says, Loi Kavram lehirach, he's not talking about Avram of old. He's also talking about the Avram that lives in you, Moshe. The fact that you're questioning, it means Loi Kavram, because it's not enough that you're like Avram. And you have in you and in the Jewish people this emunah that is infinite, that is eternal, that is timeless, that is always there in every single Jew, no matter who he is or she is. That's an inheritance. But where I am today, my nature, my disposition, my character, it's not worked through. There's resistance, there's blockages, there's trauma, there's childhood wounds, there's pain, there's suffering. And therefore I'm triggered, I protest. Why? Comes Moshe, and he gives us the next gift. He teaches us the ability that in that space where there are questions, in that space where there is hirharta, we can also bring in holiness. And that happens through God's communication, Vaera, by Hashem saying, I appeared. What do you mean? I'm having all these questions. I get it. And then Hashem says, Vaera, I appeared. There's a presence that Hashem says, I'm present in that space too. I'm present there too. And if you embrace that space, you'll find me too. You'll find me there. You don't have to amputate any part of yourself. You don't have to cut off a part of yourself. This is deeper than Avraham. Avraham is the foundation. Yitzchak is the foundation. Yaakov is the foundation. But the fact that they were not maharer, that's not enough for you, Moshe. That's a Yerusha. But now we need Geula. Geula means it has to become mine, it has to become yours, it has to become ours. So of course you have to ask, Lamare Salamaza. And the accomplishment of Moshe is that in that space, you can transcend the questioning God. In that space, you can embrace Hashem fully, peacefully, in that space where there is naturally doubt and protests. You can really allow your relationship to shine right there so that you can accept and embrace with peace. Yeah.
Is it the same like in our time when the Rabbi say Admata, the same question?
Perhaps. Yeah.
In some way, asking where you're going, second thought, like you said, you're going all the time.
Yeah.
It comes from the soul or from the body?
That's what he says. There's both elements. Both are very real.
Because the Rabbi brought us in our time to ask this question.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can.
Yeah. So what are we learning here? Somebody writes, epigenetics is the tag attached to a gene based on ancestors' experiences, and then we could become cycle breakers. And this is true with difficult experiences, and it's also true with positive experiences. So our dear friend says, I'm not convinced that past trauma actually affects the DNA. DNA, based on what science knows now, is such a complex structure made up of amino acids. I can't understand how the amino acid sequence could change from emotional or even physical trauma. The transmission of the DNA to the newborn child originates from the DNA of the parents. How do the amino acids get altered through trauma? I think the emotional trauma inherited is a more subtle type of transmission. So it's not set in stone. It's not seen in an alteration of the amino acids and the sequence of the DNA molecules. The trauma and past is held in the body in a more subtle, more spiritual way, perhaps. Since I am no geneticist, so I hear. Is this sikh explaining that there is a faith gene, but that it alone is not enough? Does this explain the huge disconnect a lot of us experience with what we know, believe, and the way we feel, act? Exactly, that's the whole point. There is a faith gene. We're using the word gene, a little metaphoric. It's also genetic. But gene as he says, it's B'Yerusha. Of course it's a faith gene. This is what's called the Pinta L'Yid that every Jew has. You can't get rid of it even if you try. You can't change the color of your eyes. Say, you're not my mother, you're not my father. There's biological truths, there are spiritual truths. There's the color of your eyes, there's the color of your soul. Bistayid. The question is, you can embrace it, or you could fight it. But there could be a disconnect. And what's the disconnect? The disconnect is, there's something we know deep down, or we believe deep down. Belief is really knowledge, it's a form of awareness. And then there's the way I feel. There's the way I act. There's the sensations in my body. There's the emotions in my body. And there's a huge disconnect. Somebody says, my father recently explained to me that faith is a craft we have to hone and master over a lifetime. So maybe this is the idea. Take what you are given and work with it to make it your own. Yes. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu introduces, and for this he has to ask the question, because he has to work with the resistance. You get it? You hear the word? You got to work with the resistance. Don't run away. Don't say, I have a munah. In the place where I say, what? Why? That's where the protest is. That's where the resistance, that's where the fear is. Don't run away. God says, I appeared. I'm going to help you find me in the resistance. I'm going to help you integrate truth into all parts. So you don't have to amputate your identity and just rely on the faith gene. You're going to integrate it in your feelings, in your mind, in your heart, in your gut, in your body, in the place where there's a question. Lama re'osa. Hashem says, I appear to the Avos, I appear to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This communication of Hashem to Moshe is something that happens right now in response to his question, saying that even though on your own, there are so many questions and protests, nonetheless, I'm empowering you and I'm shining this light on you that you can find this access, this awareness, this intimacy in that space where on your own, you're rattled with questions. Somebody says, this is quite physical. Take diabetes, for example. Whole communities suffer from their ancestors' problems of hunger. Geula happens when we are not sheep in the positive sense of the word, doing this, just emulating. It seems like the whole notion of making everyone look the same flies in the face of getting people to own their faith. And our friend, you know who our friend is, from Pakistan, says, I think both of you are right. Bodily complexities can be inherited, like genetically transferable inabilities, diabetes, as well as emotional trauma, through spiritual connection of child to their parents, emotional trauma through soul, and bodily complexities through genetics. Both are true. Yeah. Genetics is the gun, and lifestyle is the trigger. Very good. Good line. Genetics is the gun, and your lifestyle is the trigger. So that's where you have to choose if you're going to pull the trigger or not. For this, we need conscientious awareness. Okay, the end of the Sicha I'm going to do outside, because I want to finish it today. So I'm just going to do it briefly. We still have Yud Aleph and Sif Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. He says, based on all of this, we'll understand how Rashi splits up his two explanations at the end of Shmos and the beginning of Vaera. One he attributes to Pshat, and one he attributes to Medrash. We explained that the explanations in Pshat are based on the body. But now we understand this doesn't mean that the body of Moshe was alienated from Hashem. And it was like, God, you're not on my team. Moshe was born goodness, and he brought in that light immediately. It means, listen to this, that Moshe is doing something that when you look at it externally, it could look like he's questioning God. That's what we mean, that mitzad his guf, there's hirer, there's a hirhartel midaisai. It means that when you're looking at it from a literal perspective, from an external perspective, you can interpret it as an opposition to God. So therefore, on the level of pshat, on the level of guf, which is applicable to every Jew wherever he or she is, how do we interpret it? We interpret it as Moshe questioning God. Because we need to help people find their emunah wherever they are, including by those people whose body is still eclipsing their soul, so they can't experience the emunah of the soul. There is a disconnect. The body asks God, why? I'm really not okay with you. And there is the sense of disconnection and mistrust. So Moshe is there for them. Moshe is the leader of all the Jewish people. Moshe doesn't give up on Jews. And Moshe helps them experience the Vaera, to be able to find an awareness that is so deep, that is so real, that in their pain and in their body, they should be able to find connection. And they don't have to live in the space of separateness, of alienation, of questions and more questions and more questions. So it doesn't mean Moshe himself is in that place. It's a place of Moshe where he's worked through in his body. And when you look at it externally, Moshe Rabbeinu is accomplishing something. Moshe Rabbeinu is doing something. If you look at it from a very simple perspective, it looks like that's what it is. But what is it really? It's really finding the emunah in the body. And therefore it relates to every single Jew. On the next level, Rabbi Seinu Darshu in Parshas Vaera, when we talk about the neshama, when you see by Jews their soul, then there's no questions on God. All they want to understand is, what is your name? They want to understand Lama Re'esa with their mind because they want a deeper relationship. So Moshe Rabbeinu helps them see that even intellectually they can experience God in their seichel. The emunah can integrate the God who is beyond rationality and God who is beyond understanding and God who I can't wrap my brain around. That itself can be very integrated inside of me. In other words, my mind doesn't become a trap. It opens me up to that which transcends my mind. Based on all this, he says we also understand the connection to Chavdala Tevis. The Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit often falls out in Parshas Vaera. So it's by divine providence. The Alter Rebbe passed away, Mitzrayim Shabbos, the beginning of Sunday of Vaera. And here the Rebbe says something interesting. The Alter Rebbe revealed the shit of Chassidus Chabad. This was his achievement. But the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid gave the world Chassidus, but the Alter Rebbe gave Chassidus Chabad. Why? What was the addition? You have the Baal Shem Tov, you have the Maggid, and you have the Baal Tanya. So the Rebbe says there's one aspect that we want to bring out. There's others, but here he wants to bring out one aspect. And that is, Chassidus ignited very much emunah. The Baal Shem Tov lit up the fire in the Jewish soul. The Baal Shem Tov was like divine nuclear energy. You know, he resurrected the Jewish world. What was the Alter Rebbe's achievement? The Alter Rebbe wanted that the nuclear energy of emunah should become fully integrated. That emunah, which is an inherent state in every Jew, and when you reveal it, it's very powerful. But the Alter Rebbe wanted it should be fully integrated, and when things are integrated, it means they permeate my brain on every level. They permeate my prefrontal cortex, and they permeate my limbic brain, and they permeate my amygdala, and they permeate my vagus nerves and the nervous system all the way into the body. The Alter Rebbe wanted that Chassidus, emunah, should permeate the whole person, the holistic person. And that means Chabad, Chachma, and Bina, and Das, the various parts of the brain. So that I shouldn't only rely and trust that there's a core, a gene of faith inside of me that can be concealed, but I'm disconnected. But the emunah grows into a full, mature person because it's fully integrated in my own personality and with my own koiches. Maybe before on my own, I couldn't do this. But the Alter Rebbe tried to teach how the emunah that the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid ignited in the Jewish soul could be fully integrated in Chabad and even in the chutzah. What does chutzah mean? Outside, that outside which considers itself separate and feels itself as disconnected from the divine and conceals the revelation of emunah. But there's no place that you can't reach, because there's no place that's really alien. There's no part of you that's really alien. It's just waiting for that elevation, for that liberation. And there's no place you have to run away from. That's the chiddush. You say, but I have all these questions. You don't have to run away. There'll be Vaera over there also. You don't have to run away from your pain. You don't have to run away from your resistance. There'll be Vaera there too. The revelation of emunah that came through the question of Moshe was through Hashem answering Vaera el ha'avos, that this level of seeing and emunah that Jews have from the avos can become yours. It doesn't only have to be a faith gene. It could become your gene. It could become yours. And just as it was with Mitzrayim, he says it's also true with us. We said that the Munah is what allowed the Geula. So he says, our Geula happens through your futzum and esachachutzum. Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will spread out everywhere. That is Geula. That means Geula consciousness pervades the universe and pervades the human universe, the micro and the macro. So just like by Mitzrayim in Egypt, it's this emunah. Which emunah? The Jews always had emunah. Ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. But that emunah becomes theirs. In the ultimate Geula, it's your futzum and esech chutza. The emunah is not just transcendent faith that is aloof, that is sublime, but it becomes my oxygen. It becomes my food. It's really integrated. I bring it into every nerve. I bring it into every cell. I bring it into my gut. I bring it into my kishkas, to my body. And it begins, I bring it into my mind, into all parts of my mind. Even those parts that have all these questions and has the resistance. This is what chutzah means. There's no place that you have to run away from. Your futzah meinesecha chutzah was Mashiach telling the Baal Shem Tov, you don't have to amputate any part. Everyone is ready. Everything is a vessel for the real thing. And that brings us Simar Mashiach, that all the Jews, every type, there's no those that are not part of it, because here it's about everybody, chutzah. All Jews and every Jew will merit, he says, to experience the complete and full geula, the geula of wholeness, as he finishes off B'mheira b'yameinu mamash, speedily, literally in our days. Question: how does this work with converts? Converts who come from Gentile parents. Why did I have an urge to convert to Judaism when I don't even have these genes? Great question. So the Rambam has a letter, Maimonides, he writes to Rabbi Avadia, the convert, and he says that all Jews, their lineage is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The convert, his or her lineage is directly to God, the child of God. Every convert has within them a hidden, so to speak, a hidden Jewish spark that was dormant, and then at some point it emerges. That's why the expression in Talmud is Ger shenisgayer, a convert who converted. A convert who converted. Hold on one second. Hello?
Would it be hard for you to go pick up Mendel now and go?
No.
You could do it?
Yeah.
Really? You could leave right now?
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Bye. So it's a convert who converts because even before there is a spark. Great question. I understand that this is what das means. You bring it into the body. Yeah. Okay, Chevre, just to remind you, tonight, 9 o'clock p.m., Basi Legani, 1962, Part 3. It's going to be streamed live on theyeshiva.net, 9 o'clock tonight, Be'ezer Hashem. It's going to be in person, 4 Dogwood Place in Pomona. It's a big house in Pomona. That's where we learned together last week. It's going to be, God willing, a fascinating class on a fascinating mimer. Wow, I see the deer walking in front of my house. It's extremely graceful, and I wish you all a beautiful day, an awesome Shabbos, and an extraordinary, an extraordinary Hatzlacha and all. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. You too, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.